My name is Dietrich Schmidt-Vogt. I work for the World Agroforestry Centre and I'm based in the East Asia office in Kunming, China.
Again, another very diverse region. You're covering different landscapes, different situations. I mean, people following the process here, following COP18 and other COPs, may be tempted, governments may be tempted to perhaps plant a lot of forests, which look very good from an aerial photographic point of view and bumps up their status in RED+. How are you counteracting that? I mean, is it a good thing, first of all? And if not, what do you do to counteract that approach?
This is especially a good point when you're looking at China, where I'm based, and where we have a process of increasing forest cover over the past decades, or the past few decades actually, that has been highly lauded internationally. But if you look closer, and if you see what actually counts here as forest cover, then you look at some commercial plantations, you look at the rubber plantations in tropical southern Yunnan, for instance, or other countries of the Mekong region, you look at the commercial timber plantations, which actually are pretty limited in terms of the functions that they fulfill. So we look at this process critically. It can fulfill certain criteria, it gives a country a good name, but if we come closer to the ground, we can see that they are poor in biodiversity, for instance. They can be poor in other ecosystem functions, such as hydrology, microclimate, or providing diverse livelihoods. So first of all, we are trying to understand these processes. We're also doing research on these plantations, and in the long run, we are also trying to counteract this by trying to maintain what diversity there is, or by encouraging policies that provide incentives to farmers to not just go only for one crop, or to governments to only go for one type of land use, but to maintain diversity on the landscape scale.
I mean, can we focus a little bit closer on what you mean by diversity? What kind of livelihoods can be had from the forest? What kind of land use you can have in a particular, I mean, pick a region, perhaps southwestern China. What diversity existed there previously? What would be adequate diversity now?
Southwest China is a very good example. It was and still is a place where smallholders mainly make the decisions on what kind of land use is being carried out. And in the past it was indeed quite diverse. Paddy fields or different types of dry crops, tree plantations, tea for instance. Now we see a process of simplification that is driven by policies partly and partly driven by market mechanisms. So where we had a landscape where we could say maybe 5, 6 or 8 different land uses existed, now we look at landscapes where in the flatland you have banana, on the slopes you have rubber and nothing else. So that is first of all a poor landscape in terms of diversity, but also a risky livelihood in terms of fluctuating incomes from only a few crops, or the danger of diseases that could affect certain crops. So that is the process that we are seeing.
Okay. And what might be the long-term effects on the soil, for instance, of losing that diversity, of perhaps just growing one crop, say rubber and banana, as you mentioned?
Well, we don't know yet very well, but in the long term it's usually an impoverishment of soil, because soil is not just earth, no, it's also organisms which account for fertility of the soils, and organisms are very closely linked to tree species. So if you reduce the diversity of tree species, you also reduce the diversity in the soil, and you also reduce functions in the soil. So generally it means an impoverishment in terms of nutrients and also other functions. We're also understanding hydrology, that water regime under a plantation of course is different than under a diverse forest. Generally can say it's a process of degradation or reducing functions, but we are still in the process of trying to understand exactly how that works. There's a lot of, you can say, anecdotal talking about the effects of plantations, but not yet so much really well-grounded research, and that's where we as a research organization also see our field.
Right. Is it true to say, to some degree, we're kind of going back to how things were? There was a much greater diversity before the big agro industries came our way, before they started planting, you know, laying down huge plantations. There was plenty of diversity 100 years ago, 150 years ago. What do we have to learn from history?
Exactly. I mean, that is, in some ways we are trying maybe to go back, but we are looking again at a region where we have many countries, many different policy regimes, and where the various countries are at different stages of development. China is way ahead in its development towards agricultural business, agribusiness. A country like Laos, which in Yunnan which is the province where Kunming is located. Laos is way behind, decades. We still have a relatively diverse landscape there, but we also see the same processes. So we can actually use the experiences or the results that we get from our research in China in order to give lessons to other countries. But it's right, in a way we are trying to learn from history and try to apply the positive lessons that we learn from history to the present.